Well, hello, my lovely little horrorling. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. Gather round because Mama's got some more scary stories to tell you tonight. But first, hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel, and you will be the first to hear about new scary story videos just like the one you're about to listen to. Are you ready? Let's begin. This happened back in 2014. I was a 20-year-old community college student living with my parents in Southern California. I had a tight-knit group of stoner friends. There were 5 of us, myself included. We're all still best friends today. Like all bored suburban kids, our days hanging out usually consisted of loitering in parking lots, getting stoned, and going to parties when we could. We had a few smoke spots around the town where we would go to get high. Our main spot was a place we called the Sewer Lair. It was a giant storm tunnel at the end of a trail in this canyon area behind one of the local neighborhoods. It was secluded and we could be as loud as we wanted since there were no houses nearby. The tunnel was maybe 20 foot in diameter. A small stream of water ran down the center of it. There was this offshoot directly to the right, just past the entrance, that led to another, smaller tunnel system. This is where we would hang out. We would come here almost every night. So one night we were at the Sewer Lair. It was maybe around 1 a.m. We would usually hang out pretty late and wait for our parents to go to sleep, so we didn't come home and have to see them smelling like weed and cigarettes. Me and the boys were smoking, talking, and listening to music. The usual. Except this night, water was draining from one of the tunnel systems further down. It was pretty loud. It sounded like a small waterfall. This happened a few times before, so we didn't think anything of it. We don't get much rain in California, so it made sense that this would only happen every once in a while. A few hours in, one of the guys kept looking over at the main tunnel. He says he thinks he's hearing voices. We tell him it's just the music and our voices echoing, but we turned off the music and listened silently to prove that he's just stoned and being paranoid. We listened closely and we could hear these faint voices. It was difficult to hear because of the waterfall noise, but it sounded like a group of people chanting. We froze and traded glances. We sat in silence and listened for a few minutes. One of the guys finally snapped and insisted we go check it out. A couple of the guys were scared and didn't want to do it, but after some bickering we decided to go and see what was happening. There were 5 of us. What could go wrong? So we used the flashlights on our phones to make our way down the main tunnel. We walked for about 15 minutes and the chanting got louder, but it still sounded very far away. We still couldn't make out what they were saying because of the waterfall being so loud, but it was definitely a group of people speaking in unison. We walked for a while longer. At this point, we had made it so far that there wasn't even graffiti on the walls or trash on the ground anymore. As we continued walking, we noticed that the tunnel was getting warmer. It was always really cold in here, so it was strange that the temperature was gradually rising the further in we went. We kept moving. The chanting was getting loud, so we knew we were getting close. It was loud enough to realise that the chanting was in a different language and that it had to be at least 4 or 5 people. We kept moving and noticed that the graffiti on the walls started to show up again. It was different than before, though. It was all very eerie. I immediately brushed it off as just edgy kids trying to scare people, but the further we walked, the more unsettling the markings on the walls became. It was a lot of weird occult type stuff. There were melted black candles scattered on the ground with these weird trinkets around them. The trinkets looked handmade and were mostly animal bones, string and cloth. We were all quietly inspecting the area when one of the guys points down the tunnel and tells us to cut the lights. We turn off our flashlights and look. We could see a faint flickering orange light far down the tunnel. It was barely visible because it was so far away, but we could tell that the light was coming from either candles or torches by the way that it was flickering. It wasn't a direct light either, so it had to be coming from one of the offshoots in the tunnel. Our phones were all low on battery by this point, so we started speed walking towards the orange light. The chanting continued. Then, out of nowhere, a blood-curdling scream bellowed from the tunnel up ahead. We all froze and put our lights down. It was the most horrifying scream I've ever heard in my life. I couldn't even tell if it was human or an animal. The chanting continued, and then another horrifying scream echoed down the tunnel. The guys were getting ready to get the heck out, but I insisted that we checked it out. I led the way as we slowly walked towards the light. The chanting and screaming continued. We made it about 30 feet from the offshoot that the lights and the voices were coming from. The tunnel was very hot by this point, and it smelled awful. The air was thick and it was difficult to breathe. We were sweating and it felt like we were suffocating. We inched our way forward to the offshoot as the chanting continued, flinching every time there was another awful scream. The screams had become increasingly more violent and non-human sounding. We were all lined up with our backs against the wall of the main tunnel in front of the offshoot. The chanting and the screams were coming from right around the corner. The boys gestured at me to take a peek, so I took some deep breaths. My heart was pounding. I quickly peeked in for a second and then pulled back. The offshoot was exactly like the one at the entrance that we would hang out at. At the centre was a naked man on his knees with his hands on the ground and his back to me. He was covered in dirt and sweat. He was in front of what looked like some kind of handcrafted altar. The walls were covered in writing. The whole area had crowds of black candles lining the walls, and they were all lit. There had to be at least 50 or 60 of them. The man was also sitting in the centre of some kind of candle formation. My face went numb. I looked at the guys and I couldn't even speak. The chanting and screams continued as I just gave them a blank stare. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. The chanting and screaming sounded like it had to be at least 5 people, but there was only one guy in there. I decided to take another peek mid-chant. This time, my whole body went numb. All of the chanting and all of the screaming was coming from this one man. It was like he had 5 voices at once. I gestured to one of the guys next to me to take a look. He stepped forward and his foot brushed against the ground, making a loud scraping sound that echoed. We all froze. Then the chanting completely stopped. My heart dropped into my stomach. It was dead silence. We all looked at each other and then, out of nowhere, we started to sprint for the entrance all at once. None of us even said a word, we just ran as fast as we could. It felt like we were running forever. We ran for about 10 minutes before finally getting out of that storm tunnel. We stood in the field in front of the sewer lair and caught our breath. A couple of the guys were throwing up from the sprint, and after we caught our breath, I told them everything I saw. They were all speechless, trying to comprehend what had just happened. We started hearing screams again from the tunnel. This time they were long and drawn out, almost like a howling wolf. We ran up the trail to the neighbourhood and got the heck out of there. We vowed to never come back again. This was 6 years ago, but it still haunts me and the guys today. I have no explanation for what happened and for what I saw. I don't know much about Satanism or the occult, but if anyone does, feel free to give your thoughts on what you think was happening that night. So there we have it, my little horrorlings. Some more scary stories to creep into your dreams and turn them into nightmares. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell to find out first about more videos just like this one. Sweet dreams!